The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
We're so done with New Year, New You. This year, it's more you on Bumble. More of you shamelessly sending playlists, especially that one filled with show tunes. More of you finding Geminis because you know you always like them. More of you dating with intention because you know what you want. And you know what? We love that for you. Someone else will too. Be more you this year and find them on Bumble.
Amateur Traveler, episode 922. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about marshrutkas, minarets and madrasas, snow-capped mountains, Silk Road cities, and yurts as we go to the stands in Central Asia. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Central Asia. I'd like to welcome to the show Meg Cox from megtherolling.egg.com. We'll get into why that is later on, who has come to talk to us about Central Asia or the stands. Meg, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. It's really lovely to be here.
That is not an Uzbekistan accent that I'm hearing here. So what is your connection with Central Asia?
Really just fell into it. So I planned quite a large trip, which was an overland journey from England all the way to Malaysia, which took me through Central Asia, through Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan. And I just was there, was, oh my God, this place is amazing. I don't know why people aren't talking about it more. I don't know why people aren't coming here more often. It has something for everyone. It's really just a beautiful place to go. So I felt like I wanted to promote a little bit.
Excellent. And for this particular episode, which of the stands are we going to be emphasizing?
I think we'll mostly be talking about Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. We'll briefly touch on Almaty in Kazakhstan because it's a nice entry point to the area. Okay. But Kazakhstan is huge, so I don't think we're not going to go into that now. And maybe briefly one place in Tajikistan because it's convenient as an exit point.
Excellent. I think you already told us your why. People should go to the stands. So what kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
I think it's going to be very much a taster to the region itinerary. All of the countries have so much to offer and you could easily spend a month per country because it's so far away. People want to go and I think to see most of the countries and just get a flavour of all of them. And they are really different and they have very different offerings. So I think it's quite nice to do a trip that you can see some of the nature in Kyrgyzstan and then you see the cities of Uzbekistan and it rolls together quite nicely.
Excellent. Where do we start?
Like I mentioned before, Almaty, I think, is the perfect entry point. So this is in Kazakhstan. It's quite a Western city, I would say. So it's quite a nice introduction. You're going to recognize lots of things about that city. It's not crazy. And it's called Almaty because that means apple in Kazakh. Alma means apple. So it's where apples are thought to have originated from, or at least it's claimed to be if you're from Almaty. And yeah, it's a very nice city.
And what are we doing in Almaty?
I think I personally found it nice to just slightly wander around. It is a really modern city, so it's not so different from European or Western cities I found, apart from there is a lot of Soviet infrastructure. There's a really lovely kind of cathedral called Ascension Cathedral in one of the parks, which is this beautiful yellow colour, like an Orthodox style Christian church, which is very nice to see. And then I think also what's good is that they have, as all lots of Soviet countries have, this incredible opera theatre where you can get really cheap opera ballet tickets of pretty high quality. So that's also quite fun if you're there for one night at least to go and visit. So the
And that's
food.
the
So
Abay Opera House.
yeah, exactly. So there's a really big street called Abay Street, and it's around that area. And I think food-wise, you're going to have lots of Central Asian food the whole trip. This is a great place to try Georgian food, which I think people don't often try, but it's incredible, and there's so much of it in Almaty. And if you're there at skiing time, there's also a ski resort just outside the city centre called Shimbilak, which is quite good fun.
Okay. And what should we know about skiing in Central Asia? Is anything different about it other than it's cheaper?
I've only ever skied in Central Asia, actually, so I don't really know. I think it was a lot cheaper. The one in Kazakhstan felt to me very European, very modern. You could après ski. It was really modern. It didn't really feel like Soviet style or anything. I also went skiing in Kyrgyzstan. That was much more, I had to really fight to be given a helmet. They wouldn't give me one. So that was very much not kind of European vibe. But the one in Kazakhstan, very much European style. There's also in that mountain area the largest, highest ice skating rink, which is called the Medu Ice Skating Rink. That is really worth a visit, I think. It's set in the mountains and it has this insane Soviet mural around the edge. That's really cool to see.
Anything else you want to do in Kazakhstan before we move off?
If you are there enough time for a day trip, you can go to a little bit east of Almaty to Kolsai Lakes and the Charon Canyons. You can just do it as a one-day trip, which you can organise from lots of local tour groups in Almaty. And they'll take you up to this really beautiful lake, which is cradled in the mountains, surrounded in pine trees, which is very beautiful. And then you do a few stops in the canyons and it allows you to see some of the nature side of Kazakhstan, which is really beautiful. It's just a bit harder to access because of how vast the country is. That's quite like a nice thing that you can just do from Almaty. So over to the Tian Shan Mountains. It's really doable. It's really nice.
One of the things that always surprises me, and I have not been to the stands, we had booked an amateur traveler trip that got canceled by COVID. But when you picture Central Asia, you tend to picture long, flat plains. And then you see pictures of Kolsai Lakes National Park or something like that with pine trees and alpine lakes and such. And you go, oh, my mental picture here is not accurate.
Mm-hmm. I think the problem is that a lot of it is also steppe. So that vastness in Kazakhstan. Right. So I traveled all the way from the very west to the very east on trains. And I can tell you, the entire journey on those trains, you're just looking at completely nothing, not even a bush. Sometimes a camel would be in the middle there, but all around the edges, like around the Chinese border and then Kyrgyzstan and those countries are so mountainous. I think Kyrgyzstan is about 94% mountain range. It's just insane. So Kazakhstan, that big block is just steppe. But yeah, down the bottom near the Kyrgyz border and that region, so really rich nature. There's a little bit too, there's another national park in Kazakhstan called Aksu-Zabagli National Park. That's very foresty, very green, have lots of tulips there in the springtime. So yeah, it is not at all steppe, but quite a lot of it is actually still steppe.
Okay. Is our next stop Kyrgyzstan then, or?
Yes, it is. So next up is Bishkek, which is the capital of Kyrgyzstan. You can just get a very modern sort of normal bus from Almaty to Bishkek, which sort of traces along the border and then drops down. It was very convenient. Got me there, I think, late in the evening in Bishkek, but the bus station is right in the city centre, so it's really easy. And from there, I would recommend not spending too long in Bishkek. It wasn't my favourite city. It's very Soviet. It's very blocky. So
very Soviet, meaning that the architecture is solid rather than decorative.
Grey. Yes, absolutely. Very grey, very straight roads. In the city centre, it's just, it wasn't really my favourite thing. There are some interesting things to see. So you've got this thing called Victory Square, which is quite open with this flame that's always lit in this kind of weird structure, which again, it's still very Soviet, but it's quite cool to see. There's a really good national museum there, which I would recommend. Maybe the only museum I'd recommend in the region, but where each floor takes you through a different era of Kyrgyz history, which is, and it's very well done actually. And then around the back of that, you have this ginormous statue of Lenin. And you'll notice in Kyrgyzstan, they're very pro-Lenin still. So
Okay.
their tallest mountain is called Lenin's Peak. There are so many streets called Lenin Street. Yeah, they really like Lenin still there, which is interesting. But he gave them their identity. Kyrgyzstan wasn't a republic or anything until the Soviet era. So it's almost like a founding father in a weird way.
Okay. I get it
So
then.
that's going to be quite interesting. Yeah.
Hmm.
Another thing I think that's probably worth seeing in Bishkek as well is the Osh Bazaar. So you're going to find bazaars literally everywhere in every city. This is my favorite one, the one in Bishkek. Confusingly, it's called Osh Bazaar, and Osh is a different city in Kyrgyzstan. But this one is in Bishkek, and these places are just completely wild, but amazing to visit.
I'm thinking Osh means east in Slavic, but I'm pulling that out of an orifice, so I don't know whether I'm getting that correctly or not.
It is in the east of the country, so maybe that's right, actually.
And I'm getting no. The name from the city comes from a water goddess.
Okay,
Apparently, it's just coincidental.
interesting.
Anything else you want to do in Bishkek?
Not massively. There's a nice afternoon trip to a thing called the Burana Tower, which is just like a minaret
Hmm.
out on the outskirts of mountains. But to be honest, you're going to see so many minarets in Uzbekistan. I don't think it's really worth going to, but it's there if you wanted to.
Okay. Where do you want to go in Kyrgyzstan?
So Kyrgyzstan is very much nature driven. It's more one for people who like hiking or any of this sort of thing. If you're there between June and September and you have a bit more time, I think you should definitely do the Songkul lake hike. It's quite a high altitude lake. I think it's over 3,000 meters, but you can go to one of the villages near the bottom and do maybe a few days to a week long horse trek or hike where you go up to this lake. And Kyrgyzstan has a huge nomadic population. And in those summer months, the nomads are up there grazing their cattle and living up there in their yurts, that traditional sort of nomadic Mongolian looking structure. And you can
Hmm.
go and then you'll stay in the yurts with the local people and cook food for them and just see this incredible lake. So if you're there in that season, I think that'd be great to do if you have the time. Just
How
looks
would you
amazing.
arrange that, the yurt stay or the hike? Is that something that there are normally tours available, or you just go out and knock on a yurt, or
I think you probably could just go and knock on the yurt. They're really friendly people in Kyrgyzstan. But if you're a bit like, I want to know where I'm going to sleep tonight, they have a really big network of community-based tourism in Kyrgyzstan. It's a really
Mhm.
big thing. So every single town, no matter how small, have a few homestays set up to do this. I think you can just Google community-based tourism Kyrgyzstan and have a big website, and then you can find the town that you're going to stay in or whatever. And there's loads of different local guides and people, a whole network, which is really useful. And it's all quite informal, but it works really well.
Okay. And it looks like the website is CBT Kyrgyzstan, Community Based Travel Kyrgyzstan.
Mhm. If you don't have enough time or the wrong season, so I personally was in this region in winter, in the depths of winter, actually the
Okay.
coldest winter the region has seen in decades. So I decided that I was absolutely not going to travel 3,000 meters above sea level to this lake in the depths of winter.
It
So
seems
I
like a good
opted.
idea.
Yeah, I actually really thought about it for a while. I was like, you know what, I do like my fingers and toes, so I'm not going to do that. So I traveled across over to the east side of Kyrgyzstan to Karakol, and that route takes you along this very big lake called Kul Lake. Kul, that end bit means lake in Kyrgyz. So yeah, this incredibly large lake. And I broke up my journey to Karakol because it's quite a long ride after about 5 hours in a little town called Bokumbayevo or something like this, and stayed there for a night in a yurt as well on the shores of the lake. So those yurts are more set up for tourists, especially because I was there in winter. There's no nomads staying in the yurts at that time, but I wanted
Mm.
to stay in one whilst I was there and got to experience it. And I swam in this icy cold lake, and there was literally no one around. Which was just incredible. And it's just surrounded by mountains. And in the town, even, it's a traditional kind of rural town where the streets are all dirt, the houses are all just one story, quite colourful normally. And you just
Mm.
look down a street, and one way, this incredibly large lake. And then you turn around, and it's just a wall of mountains. I just thought it was amazing. So that's very fun to visit. And then as you continue traveling towards Karakol, there's a canyon area called Skazka Canyons, which You might be a bit canyoned out if you've done the Charon Canyons in Kazakhstan, but if you're not, this is beautiful too. And it's really right by the road, so you can just stop off. I hitchhiked my way down, so it was really easy. But there's also buses and shared taxis.
You hitchhiked from where to where?
From Bokumbayevo down to Karakol. It's quite a common form of transport in Kyrgyzstan and all of Central Asia. You just might actually have to pay a little bit of money. It's not always free. But if you're happy to pay a few pounds towards the petrol, or dollars towards the petrol, people will very happily pick you up. It's really safe. And often they'll pick up more than just you. So they'll pick you up and then there'll be someone else and they'll pick them up and you all get picked up. And it's almost like a bus, but it's just people driving from A to B.
Okay. Almost like a community collective taxi.
Exactly, yeah. So you do also have kind of more official shared taxis. And then this thing called a marshrutka, which is like a minibus, which, yeah, maybe you've heard of. It's like in lots of different...
How many people can one fit in a van kind of thing, yeah.
Yes. Sometimes you're like, this cannot be safe. But yeah, I've had some very uncomfortable journeys in those.
And so you were talking about going to the canyon.
Yeah. So this canyon is very beautiful. It's really orangey rock. I think the kind of myth around it is quite interesting. It's like a dragon has been turned to stone because he had cursed the valley because a woman wouldn't, I don't know, marry him or whatever. So he cursed the valley that on every full moon it would flood. And then when he saw the lake that he had created being this ginormous lake, he was so shocked that he turned to stone, which is a bit weird, but interesting.
I see where they get that from, though. There's uplift, a geological uplift in this canyon, so you get the strata that should be horizontal actually being vertical, almost like the scales on the dragon's back.
Yeah, and it is quite bent round. As you're walking around, it's quite a small area. You can almost, there's the dragon's tail, and you feel quite small walking around it. It's very interesting to explore.
Ah bon chien. Bonjour, je suis Theo, a tour leader with Explore, and this is Punti. He's helping us find truffles under the trees next to this beautiful vineyard. Maybe for tomorrow's cooking class? Oui, call is 7h. Parfait. 7:00. Not everyone gets to enjoy a Bordeaux sunset this way, but you will if you explore. No, Punti. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel, explore.
Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
And there's a cafe on top of the hill by it, although when I wasn't hopeful that it would be open because it was so out of season, but I could see people inside, so I was like, oh yeah, I can get a coffee, great. So I straight in, opened the door, and I realized that it wasn't open, it was just the family that owned it were having a big birthday party, but they just invited me in, I was drinking vodka, they gave me horse meat to try, a delicacy there. It was great fun. One of them spoke English, so it's great. She's actually spent some time in London or something. It's great fun.
Now, here's a question. How are you getting by? I'm assuming your Kazakh language skills are rudimentary.
Yes, awful.
So you're doing a lot of tourist charades, but did you find any other tools to be helpful?
So they do all speak Russian. So that I found a bit easier. Okay, all of these countries speak Russian. I'll pick up a little bit of Russian, and that would be quite helpful. English isn't that uncommon either, especially in younger populations. So there'll tend to be one person that would speak some English, and then lots of Google Translate. And luckily, I would Google Translate to Russian, which would be a lot more accurate, I found, than trying to do it to Kyrgyz or Kazakh or Uzbek.
Okay. And you had enough of a signal that you could use Google Translate as a tool?
Yes, I would normally download the languages on my phone. But yeah, I would always get SIM cards, I think, and it was really easy to do.
Okay, cool. Where to next?
So then you can continue on to Karakol, which is the second largest city in Kyrgyzstan. Very much like nature adventure place to be. From there, you can do so many amazing hikes into neighboring national parks. That's where they have the Karakol ski resort. Super nature-based, lots of these community-based tourism hubs there that will send you out to do all sorts of different things. The city itself it's fairly interesting. I'd say you are there using it as a base more than anything. It has quite a large Dungan population, which is an ethnicity which originally is from China. So that was quite interesting to see their food. They have a dish called Ashlan Fu, which is like a cold noodle soup, which is very nice to try. And there's a Dungan mosque, which is this incredible, it's almost cut like a circus building, really crazily painted and wooden. So that's quite interesting to see.
I'm not familiar with the Dungan people.
No, I've never even heard of it before, but it is right on that Chinese border, that part of Kyrgyzstan.
Right.
So really nice. But yeah, really good hikes. There's lots of hot springs as well in the area, which I would completely recommend, where these real natural hot springs where, you can just catch a marshrutka, one of these little vans just outside of Karakol, walk up this valley where it's just beautiful trees and mountains at the top. And then you go down, and then there's this beautiful river alongside you, which is very cold coming off the mountains. And then you can sit in these hot springs that they've bubbled up naturally. And then you'll also jump into that cold water and then back into the hot spring. It's just amazing. So much fun. So that's a really good way to spend an afternoon.
Okay.
I also did paragliding there. It's very cheap. I think it cost me probably under $40 to paraglide, which I was a bit concerned about when we got up to the top and the parachute had so much duct tape on. So that was a bit...
There's bargain paragliding sounds questionable, but...
Yeah. And the man didn't speak any English. It was very much, what do you want me to do now? And then at one point he just said, faster. I was like, I think I'm running as fast as I can. Is it not inflating in the way it should be? We're about to fall off the cliff. But it was so much fun. Very good. They did just leave me stranded at the bottom, but again, very friendly hitchhikers. It's completely fine. But yeah, it was an interesting experience.
That sort of implies to me that the tourism infrastructure is a work in progress.
Very much. I would say that the whole region is at the moment in kind of a sweet spot where if you're a little bit more of an adventurous traveler, you're going to have an excellent time. But I think if you're someone that's looking for a lot more structure, then I think Uzbekistan is a little bit better for that. And there are, I'm sure, tours that you can do that's more structured. But if you're willing or looking for something where you're very much on your own, trying to navigate it, because people just don't really have cars that often, it's so doable without any car, and people will be so friendly towards you, and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, Kyrgyzstan especially is a little bit interesting at times, I would say, to navigate.
If you expect things like when you're on a tour not to be stranded, then you might have to wait a little bit for the infrastructure to develop a bit more.
Exactly. I definitely would agree with that. And maybe don't do the paragliding and skiing if you're super into safety.
You mentioned, so here's the ski resort that you said was a little more challenging, where you had trouble conveying the idea that you wanted a helmet because that is apparently not a thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really good if you're into backcountry skiing. There's even the ski resort, it only has one, I don't know any of the correct terms, a proper slope only has one. The rest is just, you just go through the trees down the mountain. So if you're a very good skier, I think it's amazing. As someone who'd only skied once before, just a few weeks previously in Kazakhstan, I was slightly more nervous. And I don't know if I would back an ambulance coming to get me from this. Yeah, I took it very slowly on the baby slopes, but I think it cost me less than £20 for skiing for a day and all of the equipment. So
interesting.
A good place to try.
Cool. Anything else we want to do in Karakol?
I think that's mostly it. It's quite a nice place to do some shopping as well. There's some really lovely little local shops that sell lots of special honey or homemade goods and local produce. I got a lip balm holder, which keeps your lip balm from freezing in the cold, which is really lovely.
That is not a problem I've known was a problem I needed to solve.
See, I needed it desperately because I think just the next day there was this insane cold snap in Karakol, and it got down to, I think, about minus 24 degrees.
Oh my.
Like in centigrade, so I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but
okay.
Cold.
Still chilly.
Yes. But no, that's about it for Karakol. It's a nice place to hang out for a bit though, for sure.
And that would be minus 11 Fahrenheit.
Okay. Still pretty cold, right? I don't know. For England, that's really cold.
Excellent. Where to next?
So after Karakol, so this is the main bit of Kyrgyzstan. If you head to the south of Kyrgyzstan, it's quite interesting, but it's actually ethnically Uzbek there. So whilst in that north bit, soak in that Kyrgyz culture. Or also, if possible, whilst you're moving around, keep eyes peeled for something called Kokboru, which is this completely insane game that they play in Kyrgyzstan, which is like rugby on horseback, but the
Mm-hmm.
ball is a beheaded goat carcass, and they're tackling each other on the horses. I came across a few matches midway through or near the end. I never got to see a full one. Just completely insane. So whilst driving around, keep an eye out for that.
I
But that's
did
going to be
not
in the
know
more
that
northern
tackling
areas.
each other on horses. That's new to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a good Netflix show about it actually, which looks into that sport, but completely insane. But you head back towards Bishkek and then down. We're going to go down through Kyrgyzstan and then into Uzbekistan. And I think one nice spot to stop off at is a town called Arslan Bob, which I think is a really cute name, but it's in that south region of Kyrgyzstan. To get there from Bishkek, you've got to say goodbye to marshrutkas and any sort of large bus, because the road is going to go over 2 big mountain passes. So it's a shared taxi kind of 4-wheel drive situation only. And
Okay.
it took me about 12 hours to do. It was a big slog. It was a whole day trip. But the scenery is incredible because you're going over these 2 mountain passes. It's just amazing.
And
you
these are
get to this
jagged, snow-capped mountains is what I'm seeing.
Yes, it was a bit of a very icy roads. Obviously, I was also there in winter, so I was slightly nervous for my well-being, but it was fine. I was looking after. I find whenever you're in a shared taxi in Central Asia, you will be handed a baby. Maybe as a woman too, I'll just always be given a baby, which will be my responsibility for the journey. So I had this child that was in this incredible onesie, and it would just completely socially stare into my eyes the whole journey, and then would sleep on me at times. Pretty weird, but that kind of kept me occupied for that 12 hours.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to picture this. So you come on the bus and it's, oh, I see you're a woman. Here's your baby.
Yeah, basically. There's a very young woman who's with the baby. I assume it's their child. And they'll be looking after it for a bit. And then you can see them like looking at you in the corner of their eye. And then slowly the baby will slowly be migrated onto you. They won't really acknowledge it happening until suddenly the baby's just on your lap and that mum's asleep. And you're like, okay, so yeah, fine. And the mum would often go, we'd make lots of frequent stops. I wouldn't really know what's going on. They'd all get out of the car and I'd be like, I'm going to stay here. They just leave the baby with me. It's a lot of trust in the country, I'd say.
Huh. Interesting. And
But very
apparently, historically, this is where European plantations of walnuts come from.
Absolutely.
Alexander the Great took walnuts from the forests of Arslan Bab. And for that reason, in Russian, the name of walnut is a Greek nut.
Yeah, so this is very true. It's the home of the walnuts. If you go in sort of September time, you can help the villagers harvest the walnuts, which just, I think it's like 3,000 families will go up and they'll shake the trees and just the walnuts will fall down and everyone is harvesting them together. So that'd be pretty amazing. And the whole region has incredible walnuts, as you would imagine, to eat.
Interesting.
So definitely go wild
and do they hand you a baby while you're doing that, or?
I actually didn't look after any babies whilst in Arslan Bob, thankfully. There were a lot of children, though, and they were very curious what I was doing there. It's just someone who's wandering around. But yeah, very nice place. Very beautiful as well. And you get to really see rural Kyrgyzstan. When I was there, I don't know if it's because it was cold, but there was no running water. So in my sort of guest house that I was staying in, the lady would just bring me a warm kettle of water each morning for me to wash my face with. The toilets are often outside. In general, in Muslim culture, they often have them outside still because they're quite dirty, and it is just pure hole in the ground. And every time I went to the toilet, I fell in this ditch up to my waist in snow. And I was always in my pajamas. It's really annoying. So again, that's very much off the beaten track. And the food and stuff, you need to really be ready to just eat the meat. There's a lot of meat in that area. Really no vegetables.
Okay.
But very beautiful.
And I see they're also known for some waterfalls, but I imagine when you went, there were no waterfalls there.
They were frozen.
Yeah.
They were fully frozen. Yeah. But there's somewhat they'll have pilgrimages too, and it seems like a very holy spot. So whilst I was there, this is something I would recommend in general if you're going to a weird place, the way I would do it is I'd zoom in on Google Maps and find some of the guest houses which show up on Google Maps. And often they'll list a phone number, a WhatsApp number. And if you text the WhatsApp number, it'll be the one person in the village that speaks English and they'll help you. So I spoke to this one lovely guy called Lachin, and he arranged the shared taxi for me from Bishkek down to Arslan Bob. And then he made sure that the woman was expecting me and communicated what I wanted to her, who didn't speak any English. And then he showed me around for the day. just for free. He took me out for lunch, just really lovely, wanted to show me the town. And he showed me this amazing waterfall, which was frozen, but still very cool to see.
Interesting.
So from Arslan Bob, we are going to say goodbye to Kyrgyzstan. You'll have to go through Osh to get out, but I did not like Osh very much. I don't think it's really worth staying in. It's just like another city. There's nothing really to do there. I would just recommend you can get a morning marshrutka, like 6 a.m. It's very early, from Arslan Bob down to Osh, and then that's right on the border with Uzbekistan, and then you can cross there into the area of Uzbekistan, which is the Ferhana Valley, which is a really interesting area. And if you look at it on a map, the border situation is insane. It's very strangely divided up. And that's because this valley is the most fertile area in all of Central Asia. And it's because of that, it's where there was the most power or the most revolt populations going on. So the Soviets, when they divided up into the different republics, they decided they were going to chop that area up massively so that it wasn't ever one unified country or republic. And that's also why you have this Uzbek population in Kyrgyzstan, in that southern region.
Okay.
So it's quite interesting history. But yeah, you cross into the Ferhana Valley. There's quite a few nice places there. I personally stayed in a city called Margilan, which I would really recommend because they have an incredible silk factory. And this kind of leads us into, okay, now we're on the Silk Road. We're putting behind us our crazy, wild, nomadic Kyrgyzstan, and we're entering this Silk Road history and the more kind of city vibe of Uzbekistan.
Got it. Okay.
So yeah, I don't think you need too long in Margilan, just enough time to see this silk factory, which has free tours around it, and you can see the silkworms and buy some silk if you wanted to. It's really lovely. And it's quite nice to see a city, because we're going to spend the rest of the time in Uzbekistan in Silk Road cities, which are gorgeous and historical, but this is just a normal city. So it's quite interesting to see the markets there. You can see the food stalls. You can get a feel for the Uzbek culture beyond just the historical side. So I quite enjoyed my time there. But it can also be quite strange.
So it's just a typical city. It's only 10 centuries old.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm sorry. I was off by a few centuries. It's supposedly, according to legend, founded by Alexander the Great. So that would make it 23 centuries old. But
that's insane. So even though this one, okay, it's still crazy historic. It just doesn't have the same mosaics and beauty of the Silk Road cities.
Right.
But yeah, and obviously incredibly important. And I think maybe because it's in that valley area as well, it's probably really pivotal. But from here, you can then catch these incredible Uzbek trains. So whilst we were in Kyrgyzstan, there are no trains. You're stuck with these marshrutkas, which kind of go when they go. You just have to sit in it and wait for it to fill up. Or these shared taxis, it's all a bit kind of ad hoc and a bit random. Uzbekistan have an incredible rail line, which you can just book online. It's quite easy to do. You just have it on your phone. It's very modern. So that kind of whole bit is much easier in Uzbekistan than in Kyrgyzstan.
But do they give you a free baby? That's really the question.
So actually, the trains tend to be mostly men, weirdly, or at least like the cheaper trains. So no babies, but would have lots of free food, often forced on me because people thought I wasn't eating enough dinner. So often they'd be like, oh no, have a loaf of bread and you must eat all of it whilst you watch. So people on the trains were really funny with me. I think they don't expect to see Westerners, especially in the lower class trains. I had people... One group of men adopted me on a very long train. This actually was in Kazakhstan, but at every break, they would take me outside the train and I don't smoke, but I was like, I guess whilst I'm here, we'd be smoking these cigarettes while we watch them fill up the train with coal. I don't think it was a coal-powered train, but I think the coal-powered, like the savoirs, these hot water things that you used on the trains. So that was quite funny. I felt that, again, it just feels very, in my head, what Kazakhstan is, but it was quite cool to experience it.
Now, so you were in second class. Is there first class available, or is second class the top class? What is that train experience like?
So there's actually 3 different types of train, and then within the trains, different classes. So you have these super modern trains, which are called Talgo trains in Kazakhstan. I think they're just called high-speed trains in Uzbekistan. And that one, it's very kind of modern. You have your own little apartment, but most of them are going to be sleeper trains because they're quite long journeys. So you'll have your own cabin. It's really lovely, a really nice bed. It's just gorgeous. Then you have new Soviet trains where you still have your own cab. It's a cabin that 6 beds will be in, like triple bunked, and you'll sleep in the cabin. It's quite tight.
And when
then
you say
have the
new Soviet trains, since we know when the Soviet Union broke up, these trains are older than you.
Yes, they're still pretty old, and they still feel
but not
quite
as old as me.
No, true. But then you have the old Soviet trains, maybe more closer to your age, which are wild. These are the most fun, in my opinion, where there's no cabin. So the entire carriage is just open beds.
Okay.
Yeah. So I said the way I would imagine my first experience of this was I walked on and I almost felt like I was immediately covered in chicken grease. I don't know why. It had this weirdly oily air. And as you walk down, you if you don't like feet, do not go on this train because everyone's feet are just poking into your face. It's just scurrying down the aisle.
So it's multiple tiers. So there's still partial walls where there are beds up against them, but it's all open, like 30, 60 bunks in one car.
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
So similar to a train in India or China, it sounds like.
Yes, yeah, exactly like that.
Okay.
So yeah, very much. I had some very strange interactions. The problem I found is that there's no ladders. So if you're on the top bunk, which I often was because those are the worst bunks, so I'd often book late and get put on the worst bunk.
Okay.
I couldn't get up to my bunk. So I'd often have to ask these like Kazakh or Uzbek men to actually give me a leg up to my bunk. They'd always accept and help me get up. Yeah, it's very strange.
And the facilities, I'm assuming, is a hole to the tracks sort of thing?
Yeah, basically. And I had my walking boots on, and which you take off in the train because, as I said, just bare feet. And the men, my first train experience, the men were so appalled that I was going to have to put my walking boots back on every single time to go to the toilet. They gave me their sandals to wear. So I would just be shuffling in like these very large men's sandals up and down the train to go to the toilet. So the people are just so lovely though. And they're, very interesting conversations. There'll normally be someone that speaks English on the train and they will find that person and bring them to where you are. And then they'll act as a translator for the 20 or so hours you're on that train for. You won't get to sleep often. They'll just want to talk to you the whole time.
That's funny.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Hey Atlanta, Apple is open for small business. That's right. We're here to make starting and running your business simpler. With privacy and security built in on all devices, it's easy for you to protect your customers' data. And if you need hardware or software support, you'll get advice from business experts at no cost whatsoever. So you can focus more on the soup du jour and less on, the other stuff. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/small business or visit an Apple store to learn more.
But yeah, you can catch these trains. You can choose. So I started off in one of the more luxurious trains. Then I worked my way down the pecking order to the cheaper ones. You don't have to do that. You can do.
And what is the difference in price between the modern train and the old Soviet train?
I not huge amounts, I don't think. I think in Uzbekistan, maybe you could pay, I can't really remember, but it might be maybe like 50, 60 pounds for a really nice one. For these big journeys, they're like 20 hours. And then the cheaper ones are maybe like 15 pounds.
Okay.
So there is quite a big difference, but I don't think it's crazy. If you're on a 1 week holiday, it's quite affordable to do the fancier train.
Got it.
And some of them have quite nice dining carts.
So you got on the train and you headed to where?
So personally, I headed all the way to Khiva, or Khiva with a K, in the very west of Uzbekistan. But I think time-wise, I wouldn't recommend doing that because that is like a 22-hour train journey in one direction.
Okay.
So it takes up a lot of time. And I think the key Silk Road cities in Uzbekistan are Khiva, Bukhara, and Samarkand.
Yep.
If you can only go to one, you're going to do Samarkand. It's the most famous. It's also way more convenient. It's the closest one to Kyrgyzstan and the rest of the region. I think ideally you would do Bukhara.
That's the one that's on my list, honestly.
That was the only place I'd heard of in all of Central Asia. And it lived up to the hype. Yeah. If you're going to go to one, it's going to be that one. I'm not going to try and convince you otherwise. Bukhara was my favorite of the three. Absolutely beautiful too. So I think Margalan to Bukhara, more reasonable. It would still be an overnight journey. It'd still be about 15 hours. So it's still quite far. But that city is, all of these Silk Road cities are absolutely beautiful. Like, I can't even explain it. It's that way that kind of the pyramids and Pompeii, they're very historical places, but unlike those, this one is still lived in. It's still really alive. So you're walking around it and you can really imagine, oh, I just feel like I've traveled for days in the desert in my caravan of camels and I'm landing into Bukhara. And they've even got lots of the kind of traditional tea houses and the food centers, and it just you can really imagine what life was like all those years ago on the Silk Road. I just think it's beautiful.
And if you go to the tea houses, or let's see, your land route, so this would be chai here.
Yeah.
I've just recently learned that if you got your tea via land, your word in your native language for tea is chai. And if you got it via ocean routes, then your word is tea, which is something I didn't know. I was this many years old when I learned that.
It's quite a cool map as well to look at, isn't it? And you can see the arrows coming out. It's insane. So yeah, lots of tea. I even bought some.
And is this similar to when I'm in Istanbul, for instance, where I've got a little tiny glass with no handle on it with my tea?
So I actually have one here to show. They're always served in these bowls.
They're more of a bowl. Okay, interesting.
Yes. And you cup it. And something that took me a long time to realize or learn was that if you go to someone's house or a guest house or something, they'll put, honestly, the tiniest amount of tea in, a sip, and you'll sip it and then they'll top it back up again and sip it again. And I would be like, what are they doing? Why can't they just fill it to the brim? It's not a very big cup.
Well, it'd be hot to hold if you
respect.
Yeah.
No, it's quite nice. But it's about respect. It's about the more they have to be very attentive to you. And if someone fills up your tea to the brim, that's a sign that you've overstayed your welcome. That was interesting to learn.
Good to know.
Yeah. So get used to drinking tea from these little bowls. Another cultural thing, actually, whenever you enter someone's home in Central Asia, in any of the countries, you'll be offered tea in these tea bowls. They'll be on the table or kind of on the mat. Often you'll be sat on the floor. This weird assortment, jams in fancy cocktail glasses, towers of biscuits and nuts and fruit and all sorts of weird things.
And when you say biscuits, are we doing cookies? Are we doing the UK version of biscuits?
Yeah, so American cookies, right? Yeah, weird thing, often packaged, individually wrapped, and loads of bread, so much bread. And you'll sit down and they'll look at you. And I've now learned that you must take some bread, you must have it with the jam, and then you must say, this is incredible bread, this is great jam, this is lovely tea. This is a really big thing. I'd say stay very clear of the biscuits because they're actually really stale and out of date. One time I actually looked at the wrapper because I was like, this doesn't taste right. It was about 7 years out of date. I think they just get them out as to show. So don't eat those.
Funny. In a tea house, besides tea, are we also getting a meal, or what else are we getting in a traditional tea house?
In the tea houses, it tends to be sweets. So Turkish sweets, very sugary, like that sort of style sweets. So we had some of those in this Uzbek tea house with the tea. But yeah, they also do quite like their coffee. Again, similar to Turkish coffee, but it's mostly the tea that you're drinking.
Okay.
But yeah.
And when you say similar to Turkish coffee, so it is more solid than liquid.
Yes, exactly. In those weird pots that they're served in. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cappuccinos, European coffees was something that I was desperately missing. No, but the tea is great. So just stick with the tea, I would say.
Yep.
Just don't try with the coffee. But yeah, in Bukhara, it's just so beautiful. It's very brown, almost like stone, with these flashes of this mosaic. It's a lot browner, I'd say, than Samarkand is. There's more stone. And in all of the Silk Road cities, you have this big square, which is the Registan Square. And the one in Bukhara, I think, is just very calming. It's very slow feeling. And then on one side, you have this very tall minaret, which is like one of the big towers. It gets lit up beautifully in the evening. And it's just like a really calming place to be. And so in general, in the Silk Road cities, you have the minaret, which are these towers. You have a lot of mosques and a lot of madrasas, which are the Islamic schools. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So those are the buildings that you're seeing a lot. And these are all from the kind of Islamic times, but the money that's there to fund their construction came from the Silk Road trade, which is it's an interesting marrying of the two. But the minaret in Bukhara I found really lovely to see. It's not mosaic, it's not colourful, it is this brown, but it's lit up all golden in the evenings. It's nicknamed the Death Tower because the leader would often execute his women who had been bad by making them jump off. So it's not funny, but it's interesting. And one of his wives actually, this, I don't know how true this is, but when she was sent to jump off to die, she put on all of her clothes to form like a parachute, and then she glided down gently. And the town loved it. So she wasn't killed in the end, which is quite nice.
And it's only 900 years old, so it's the new town.
Pretty modern. But yeah, in general, in Bukhara, I'd say you just have to roam around these old sites. The markets are not in alleys and streets like they are in Khiva or other older cities. They're in these market domes, which reminds me a bit of, I don't know, Star Wars or something. In that desert land, there are these domed buildings. You can see the domes, and inside these domed ceilings, and all of the market goods are in there. And it's a really good place, I think, to pick up any souvenirs from the trip in Bukhara.
And what kind of souvenirs did you pick up in Bukhara?
So I got my teacups, which I'm very happy with. And I got a really lovely jackets. So they have very good clothing, waistcoats or really lovely jackets. So I got a nice jacket. Yeah, those are the only things I picked up. I was a bit limited on the space because I was backpacking. So I splashed out on those. It's a good place to shop.
Okay.
There is a big fortress on the outskirts. I don't think it's worth... So I went... And it's also got museums attached, and I paid for the museums, and then they were all closed, and I was quite annoyed. So I went to the lady, like, I paid and they're locked. And then she said, no, they're not locked. And I said, I will show you. And then when we realized they were indeed locked, I think they felt really bad. So I got given this insane behind the scene tour with the head historian of the area for this kind of Ark fortress thing. But in general, I'd say it's just a fortress. 80% of it's been destroyed. Stick to the old town, I would say. It's just on the outskirts, so if you're wandering past, you might want to see it, but it's not worth going into the museums I didn't really learn anything from the museums itself.
Okay.
And then from Bukhara, that's when you're then going to head to Samarkand, which is this, I think, if you Google Samarkand and that Registan Square, I think that would be enough to make you want to go to Central Asia, to be honest. I just think it's like nothing I've ever seen before. And it 100% lived up to the hype. When I arrived there in the evening, I jogged on down after being on the train all day, and I think I stood there for about 10 minutes just completely speechless. It's just stunning. And it gets lit up in the evening, and it's so beautiful.
We've done other episodes on the stands before, and the picture of that square in Samarkand just sticks in my memory.
Yeah, it's just insane. And then there were so many other lovely sites in Samarkand too. There's the Shahi Zinda complex, which is tombs of, I guess, important people, which is really gorgeous. It's almost an alleyway of tombs, but they're all completely covered in the mosaics. That stereotypical blue, greens, just so vibrant. And it's so like tight and narrow that your whole field of vision is just these mosaics, which I think is just a really special spot. That's really nice. I think I went at sunset, which I would recommend because the light is just so beautiful.
What else?
So I think that's it for the Silk Road cities. Once you get there, you're going to be wandering around. You're going to see all of these mosques and the madrasas and the mausoleums and the minarets. And I think it's just about taking it in. And you don't really need too long in each base. I think I had maybe one night, maybe 2 nights, just enough to soak it in a little bit. But you can be a little bit quick with them, I found. But just really lovely to see. And I didn't really do any of the museums or anything. I just would soak up. You have to pay to go into the Registan Square, which is 100% worthwhile because you can go into each of those madrasas. There's 3 madrasas around the edge of that square, and they are all just completely stunning. So would recommend doing that. But otherwise, you're then ready to head home. And that will either be up to Tashkent, which is the capital of Uzbekistan, which is a 2-3 hour train journey, and that has a big airport to fly out of. Or you can go from Samarkand on an overnight train to Dushanbe, which is the capital of Tajikistan, and then fly out of there.
Okay. Do you have a recommendation which you would recommend?
I think Dushanbe for me. Tashkent isn't so special. It's quite similar to Almaty in its feeling, and it would be nice, I think, to at least experience slightly Tajikistan in contrast to the others that we visited. And Dushanbe is a really weird city, but it's cool to see. Its major site is it used to be the largest flagpole in the world. It's now only the 5th largest. And you're just thinking, like, you're looking at it, why have you built this massive flagpole? But yeah, it's a really weird place, but it's quite interesting to see their culture. And the people are very different in Tajikistan than in the other countries. The language is very different. It has Persian roots, whereas the others have Turkic roots. The people are much more kind of Persian looking, much slimmer faces, whereas Kazakhstan, Uzbek, Kyrgyzstan, they're sort of Mongolian heritage, ethnicity there. So it is a really different vibe. And you can feel it becoming, you can see how then Tajikistan becomes Afghanistan, becomes Pakistan, becomes India. You can start to feel that change from the Turkey and the Mongolia down. So I think it's quite interesting to experience that. But I wouldn't spend too long in Dushanbe, I'd say. It's not the most beautiful place in the world, but it's interesting. And Tajikistan as a country is also very interesting. Just, I don't think for this trip you would have time to do it.
Got it. Anything else before we get to our wrap-up questions that we should know before we head to the stands?
No, I just think in terms of practicalities, the visa situation is really easy. For most of the countries, it's just visa-free on arrival. You just get 30 to 60 or 90 days in each. It's quite a lot. I think for Americans, you have to get a visa for Uzbekistan only. And for UK, I had to get a visa just for Tajikistan. But it's just an e-visa. It's really simple to do. You can just apply a week or so before you go, or longer if you know your dates. The money situation is really easy. It's quite cash-based, so ATMs are pretty useful. And they all have different currencies, so that can be a little bit fiddly. But yeah, in general, it's pretty easy to travel around them.
Excellent. As we go to wrap this up, you were standing in the prettiest spot in any of the countries that you mentioned. Where are you standing? What are you looking at?
So I think for me, it is that Shahi Zinda complex with the tombs, where your whole vision is just going to be these mosaics. And you can really feel the history and just everything. And it just is completely all-consuming in every sense of the word.
One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Central Asia?
I think it has to be that weird table of display of food that you get when you enter. And you're always sat on the floor and everyone's sitting over you, and you're eating with your hands and often sharing from one big bowl, and there's just tea everywhere all the time, and it's just a complete mess, but I love it. And yeah. And like always these weird fires. They have these really cool coal fires in the winter that will heat the whole room, and they'll have cut holes in it to put the kettle on, and it will just, yeah. And as a guest in someone's house, you'll often be given the room with the fire to sleep in, but it will be on the floor. And again, just insane, but amazing.
And if you had to summarize this region in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
That is a good question. Because I have it for each different country, but maybe I think 3
You
words.
could do it by country. I would give you that.
Okay, I have them by country. So for Kazakhstan, I'd say steppe, friendly people, and modern cities.
Okay.
General vibe of Kazakhstan. For Kyrgyzstan, it's mountains, nomads, and lakes.
Okay.
So much more natural feel. And then Uzbekistan is Silk Road and bread. So much bread. These big brown wheels of bread.
Okay.
And then in Tajikistan, it's mountains again. It's Persian and the Pamirs, which you haven't touched upon, but that's the big mountain range in Tajikistan.
Ah, okay. Got it. So it's mountains twice.
Yeah. Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, very mountainous. I feel like the biggest things are mountains and then Silk Road cities for me.
Excellent.
City.
Our guest again has been Meg Cox from megtherolling.egg.com. And Meg, you have to explain that.
Oh, yes. As I prequeled at the beginning, the reason I ended up in Central Asia was because I was doing this long overland trip. And I wanted something that was a bit snappy and rhyme for my blog. And rolling egg is because I'm not flying, I'm just rolling all the way from England to Malaysia.
And if we wanted to send people to your best post on this region in megtherolling.egg.com, where are we going to send them?
I have a general wrap-up post on Central Asia. Central Asia in review.
Excellent. I will put a link to that in the show notes. Meg, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for Central Asia. It's always nice, too, to have somebody on the show who's been a listener of the show, which I guess we didn't mention until this point. So lovely meeting you.
Thank you, Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouth-watering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Special thanks to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. This is my day job now. And also thanks to our advertisers, and please do keep them in mind when you're making purchases. If you want to know more about becoming a patron of the show, you can go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. New on the Amateur Traveler website is a blog post about a museum I didn't know about, which is the Museum of Broadway in New York City. So check that out. I've got some blog posts coming about my trips to Turkey and to the Balkans. Hopefully those will be out by the time this episode airs. And we have a road trip coming up to Palm Springs and to Joshua Tree National Park. So looking forward to that. Not sure if I'll be talking about it on the show, but probably be blogging about it afterwards. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.